Hello and happy Saturday. Welcome to the Nuts and Bolts Association podcast, hosted by yours truly, Randall Gim. And I'm so excited to have you guys here back at the end of the season in the NBA. And we have so much to catch up on. Last month, I was able to go to the women's Final Four. So that was occupying most of my March and the wrap up to the beginning of April. And I couldn't be more blessed to be a part of Nuts and Bolts Sports and to have some of the best Nuts and Bolts Sports analysts here with me today. First, we got all the way from the Mile High City. We got Denver native Keith Richards. How you doing this morning, sir?
Represent. Had to pull it out today.
Yes, sir, man. You know you got to represent. You know you got to put on for your city. Shout out to Jeezy. Shout out Kanye. And shout out to Greg Rector all the way from the north. How you doing, sir?
I'm all right today, Randall. How you doing?
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me today, you guys. Always love having you gentlemen on the show. And I think we'll be having Stephen Garner check in with us later on in the show. But let's get right into it. We see that jersey hanging up on your dresser there, Keith, and we got to talk about it right off the bat. So we already know about the stats. We know about Jokic getting 2,000 points, 1,000 rebounds, 500 assists in one season. But I want to talk about beyond the numbers because we have players that are from anywhere from first in the MVP rankings all the way down to fifth or sixth. If you take their current season and place it into other MVP races, they might end up winning those. And so I want to get my head into the mind of the media and figure out which way they might go in terms of narrative, because they always vote for the story, if I'm not mistaken. So, Greg, I'll kick it to you first, my man, because we already know what Keith is going to say.
Well, I'm in total agreement with Keith, and Keith and I have been in agreement for months.
Tell me about it, man. Tell me about it.
Well, the narrative that's been out there all year long has been about Joel. And yeah, Joel's had a great season. Joel does his thing. But the thing that takes away from what Embiid has done as a player is the fact that he gets every call under the sun. You sneeze, and Joel Embiid is going to the foul line. It's gotten to the point of being absolutely ridiculous when it comes to Embiid and the fouls. 27 foul free throws in a game for a guy. I mean, come on, that's just nuts. The other narrative, of course, is Giannis with what he's done with the Bucks, his complete game, you know, how he's grown and matured, etc. And then you got the guy who does all the flash in the pan stuff for the Hawks and Trae Young and his narrative. Yeah, Monty, you can call him your MVP. He's not going to win the league MVP, but you know, he's got the show, right? And this is what I've always said about it, the MVP thing, because the NBA doesn't have a set criteria for this. That's why I disagree with the whole MVP fight and argument. You want a most outstanding player and a most valuable player. Those are two different things. To me, if you're going to have that, do it right. You could then say Trae Young is your most outstanding player because of what he does on a nightly basis, etc. But the most valuable player, those 500 assists for Nikola Jokic. 500? That's making everybody around him better.
Would we name the most outstanding award after Russell Westbrook?
Yeah, sure. Why not? You know, give it to Westbrook, right?
Because that was probably one of the lowest seeds that we've seen someone win the MVP.
Yep. He was the absolute rarity when he got it, right? Because they were such a low seed.
And that's, you know, there's that narrative. There's that stat picking, and then you figure out like, hey, triple doubles. We haven't seen that before since Oscar Robertson. And it's like, okay, that's the narrative. And
yeah, except when Oscar did it, the Lakers were actually winning.
Right. Keith, man, how do you back up what Greg has to say?
I mean, I would have to agree as well. I mean, it comes down at the end of the day to MVP these days about this mind-blowing argument of, well, what's his team's record? Where are they in the standings? Which I get that. Like, you're not going to give the MVP to someone on a 16-win team. Like, that's ridiculous. No matter how valuable he is to that team, they only won 16 games. Like, you're not going to do that. But it seems that it's just always going down to the person who is one of the top 2 or 3 seeds in the conference, no matter of whether someone who is on a playoff team is having a better season or not. And you can pick whatever advanced stat, whatever narrative you want, which people do with Giannis and Joel Embiid. And every one of those things that they pick, Jokic is in one of the top of that. He's leading in PER when it comes to TPA, which is total points added. He's leading by a country mile. When you talk about defensive points saved, which has always been the argument against Jokic, that his defense is not good. Which I'm not saying he's going to win Defensive Player of the Year, which Giannis is in the conversation of, but his defense is much improved.
He's no longer a liability.
No, he's leading Giannis in defensive points saved by almost 100 points. Almost 100 points. He's leading in TPA by almost 200 points. He's top 10 in points, rebounds, and assists. Top 15 in steals. What else can you say he's not doing outside of he's not posterizing people like Joel Embiid and Giannis does? And when it comes to free throws, he's doing all of this, averaging 5 free throws less a game than Giannis and Embiid is. Like, I don't know what else the man needs to do to get respect for. He's not flashy. I'll give people that. It's not everybody's brand of basketball, but what matters is production, and his production is there.
And in every single category, last year's MVP is ahead of every category this year. He's outdone everything from last year when he was the MVP. So how can you take it away from him? How?
I'll even play devil's advocate on that argument. Like, you can't just say, well, he's better than last year. He was the MVP last year. Okay, let's give it to him this year because he was better. What I would say is he was better than last year, but who for sure is better than him this year? Like, who's going to put up better numbers than his last year's MVP? And
that's why I wanted to propose this question, because you look at Joel Embiid's season and how, all the Ben Simmons drama. You got the huge trade, taking away some core key players from your 76ers team and moving them on to the Brooklyn Nets and inheriting James Harden, and him still being the same consistency, same high level defensively, and just an overall, key piece. And he's been available. Like, he's also, like, normally that's always been the knock on him. He always missed too many games. He missed too many games. But now you can't really argue that against him because he's playing through this back stuff and he seems more healthy than he's ever been. So I was going to bring in Stephen real quick, but I think he's off. I'm going to bring in Stephen Garner, and I wanted to ask him, Stephen, what do you think is, the gap between Jokic and the others, or is there not that much of a gap? That's what I want to know.
First of all, what's going on, everybody?
Hey, Stephen.
What's good? That's a great question. I feel like the gap between Jokic and then the other two most formidable MVP options between Embiid and Giannis, I feel like it's not that much of a gap, simply because for Embiid's case, if you look at bringing context to it, you look at the teams that both of those two have had this season. You compare Jokic's Nuggets team without Murray and without Porter Jr. to the Sixers without Ben Simmons the entire season. You're looking at almost even teams. I might even say that the Sixers roster construct is worse pre-trade deadline than the Nuggets was. Looking at Aaron Gordon, you're looking at Monty Morris, you're looking at Bones Highland ascending into what he's become, Will Barton. You're looking at the pieces that they had off the bench that have also become factors, adding Boogie Cousins. You look at JaMychal Green, all of these names, and then you look at what Joel Embiid had to work with in this season and what those guys are producing or not producing in the case of guys like Tobias Harris, Georges Niang, comparing roster for roster and looking at the carrying, the backpacking that Joel's been doing. My entire thing with the entire MVP discourse, what I'm getting to, is that most of the time when people are making their cases for one or another, it's almost completely diminishing the season that other guys are having. And for the sake of just appreciating the sport for what it is, you have to be able to, first of all, watch all the guys play and then assess them that way, because watching the games is the most important thing past whatever numbers you might bring up. So bringing that, watching the games context to it, and then also looking at, like I said before, what they have and what they don't have. So all of that brought in the context. I mean, I might err with saying that Joel is the MVP this season solely off of that context alone. That's where I'm at. And that's not to diminish or degrade Jokic at all, because he's having an unbelievable season across the board. He's better than he was last season. He's more efficient than he was last season, which is literally it's godly. But I'm erring. I think if I had a vote, I'm probably gonna give it to Joel. And when I say it's by the same amount of distance that the Nets lost to the Bucks on last season. It's by less than the length of a shoe size. That's where I'm at right now.
Greg, how do you feel about Steven's analysis?
Yeah, I mean, that's fair, because at the end of the day, when you get into the MVP talk, right, it becomes very subjective.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's overly subjective. Like I said, I want the two categories. I want the most outstanding player given an award, and then the most valuable player given an award with set criteria. Until they set criteria, the subjectivity gets, and you get too much into the subjective area. So it's what I like as for my subjectivity. Keith has his own categories. Stephen will have his. Then you end up with this crazy fighting all over it, right?
Yep.
At the end of the day, I mean, you got to get rid of that. You got to get rid of that in order to have, I think, legitimacy to the award. I don't think there's any legitimacy to it.
And back to the reason why I posed this question, because this is like what drives the majority of the voting. I was listening to Dan Patrick on his morning show not too long ago, and he was talking about when he had a vote for Michael Jordan, and he would vote for Michael all the time, and then they got to go follow the narrative with whoever else it might be in there, and he would consistently vote for Michael Jordan because he's the best player. And so when you just follow those narratives, it does take away some legitimacy to the award. So Keith, like, do you think that we need to restructure how we vote for the MVP, or do you think it's fine the way it is?
I think it needs to be restructured, and I think it all revolves around what you just said. Like, he would vote for Michael Jordan because he's the best player. Like, if you want to have who's the best player award, that's not what literally MVP means. Like, MVP literally stands for most valuable player. Michael Jordan was the best player and the most valuable player. Like, it worked out that way. Mm-hmm. There was a bunch of times where LeBron didn't win the award because he wasn't probably the all-around best player, but he was, without question, the most valuable player on this team. So you got to separate best out of the conversation and really get down to it. Like, if you want it to be about who's best player, then make it MVP, most best player. But if you have valuable in there, you have to make it about valuable. Like, you gotta make a set definition of what the award is.
Exactly. And for it being so loosely decided, and having it only be voted on by the media, like, there's some people that have votes that I don't think I should have there's some people that have votes that I do not believe should have a vote.
Talk about it.
Kendrick Perkins.
Talk about it.
It should be the MVP award should be coaches and general managers only, not the media.
Right.
And I don't have a problem with the media voting. Like, there are some great media minds out there that deserve a vote, but it shouldn't be solely based on media. Like, if you have All-Star game voting based on players and fan voting and coaching, like, why not make that the same for MVP? Like, it doesn't make sense why there's only just one source of votes for that award, which is the highest award outside of Finals MVP in the NBA.
For sure. I feel like the main issue with, and this is not just specific for MVP voting, I feel like that's for the all NBA voting, offense and defense, for rookie of the years, for literally all of the selections, for all the awards across the board. The people that are appointed these most valuable, voting and having a say so on who the eventual winner is, and of course, what's now strung into that is guys' opportunities to make more money is tied to these people that are supposed to be watching all the games, but they're not watching the games. Like, you can tell if you indulge in national media shows like on ESPN or Fox Sports 1 or what have you, you can tell numerous instances in each show that guys are not watching all the games. Like, no knock on you, how you want to do your job, how you want to go about it, but when it's affecting other people's money, like their general income and how much they can grow, and in general, just the correct recognition for each award and the selections that come with it, if you're not watching all the games, you can't give a valued opinion. And when you have so much like power, when you have so much what's the word I'm looking for? When you have so much influence, if you have that much influence as a national media talking head with a platform that influences masses in any capacity, and you're not watching all the games, you're pushing an agenda, and that agenda is not the accurate one to be pushed because it's all that you're seeing instead of being all encompassing and basing it off of everything that you see. And I feel like it's just not fair.
I've fallen victim to that too, Stephen.
Sure,
I've fallen victim to that too because I, growing up, I didn't watch any college basketball, and probably the last 2-3 years I've been finally diving into it. And with this guy right here, I didn't think we should pick him up because of the national media was saying, "Oh, this guy doesn't even like basketball. He doesn't watch basketball. He wished he was a football player," and that was the narrative that was being pushed out there. And I bit right into it. I took a whole half bite of that apple, and it was the forbidden fruit, man. And I really believe that we shouldn't pick him up. But I knew he was a perfect fit for us, but I just didn't want an Andrew Wiggins 2.0 type thing, where, that mindset is really what caused Andrew Wiggins to not meet his potential. And this is what I wanted to wrap up this conversation with. So basically, what we've kind of deciphered here is that the MVP trophy is like the WWE Championship, where they're trying to find their face of the franchise, find the face of SmackDown, Raw, whatever, and they just pick and choose who is going to be the biggest money driver. What, if the narrative isn't sexy, people aren't gonna pour money into that. People aren't gonna have the MVP come over and do a signing or things of that nature. Like, Stephen has a great point in how money is a big driving factor in this, and that's probably why the media has a larger say in this discussion. So moving on from the MVP, I wanted to move on to the playoffs and figure out who are for sure contenders in each conference. Let's start over in the Western Conference. Stephen, since you're just joining us, I wanted to ask you, in the West, who do you think is your number one contender? I have a feeling I know what you're going to say.
Well, if you know me, you already know what my answer is going to be. It's going to be no other than the Phoenix Suns. They just set a franchise record for wins and then doubled up on that last night in a big win of the comeback variety in the clutch again against the Utah Jazz on the road. So let me just run down a couple numbers for the Phoenix Suns this season. So they played 38 games total, having their big three intact, their quote-unquote big three intact between CP3, Devin Booker, and DeAndre Ayton. Those guys have only played 38 games this season together. Let that kind of sink in and bring in context to the 64 wins that they have at the moment and the franchise record that they just met on Monday against the Lakers or Tuesday against the Lakers. Also, speaking in the clutch, basically with the Suns, if you don't have them completely beat by the time you get halfway through the fourth quarter, or if you're down, you may as well just concede the loss at that point because, they're 33-8 in the clutch this season. Like, those numbers are ridiculous. And again, when you bring the context of those guys only playing 38 games and them being 33-8 in the clutch alone, it's just unheard of. And then also in the clutch, they're plus 2.7 almost, plus 3 points in that last 5 minutes when games are within 5 points. And that's again on the road and at home. So you bring in all these contexts in, they're just the undeniable contender. They are the contender at the moment. And it's hard to pick against them, honestly.
I'm going to assume that we have the same contender in the West. Greg, Keith, do we have any disputes about that?
No.
No, I
But
will say this. I don't like to do it every once in a while. Every 5-10 years, I will do it. I will admit that I was dead wrong about the Suns.
Thank
I
you,
didn't
Keith.
think they could back up what they did last season, but they are, even with CP3 missing the time he did, still 8.5 games ahead of the number 2 seed in the West. So I gotta admit I was wrong about them. They are far and away the team to win in the West.
And
so-
Keith, I was waiting on. I wasn't gonna say anything until the end. I was gonna give you the whole show to bring that point up. But since you willingly did it, I gotta give you more kudos, man. Thank you for go ahead and knocking
Don't
that off.
expect
I
us
can
for
check
another
that off
5
the
to 10
list.
years.
I know.
Yeah, you're off Steven's shit list now.
Thanks.
Greg, you got anything to add to that before we figure out who the biggest threat to the Suns is?
No, I mean this is they took control of it after the All-Star break. It's their conference. Kudos to them. If you want to talk about a roster though that it hasn't had their starters, we'll get to that shortly, Stephen. And I've got one that has even fewer games together.
I know where you're going.
You better believe it. Including going into your valley and beating them, and then the very next night going to Keith's mountaintop and beating them.
I'm not gonna talk about that.
Greg, who do you have as a threat to the contender, the Phoenix Suns?
I've said it for months now. The team that has been the most consistent, and since February 1st or so, I guess was where the stat was, one of the top 3 most efficient teams defensively in the league, Memphis. I really,
Great choice.
yeah, all year, even with all those games that they didn't have Dylan Brooks for, they've just been so consistent together. The scary team, though, is Dallas. So Memphis and Dallas are the 2 that I think that you have to look at in the West.
And so who do you think would so if Dallas sees Phoenix, how many games does it go? 6 or 7?
Dallas and Phoenix, probably a 6-game series.
Phoenix taking it.
I still got Phoenix taking it, but
Keith, do you have any other threats to the Phoenix Suns besides the Mavs or what else did you say? Sorry.
I think it really is just those 2. There was a sliver of chance where I had hope that Porter Jr. and Murray were going to be back by the time of the playoffs. That Porter Jr. almost certainly is not going to be back. Murray, there's a slight chance, but really at this point, it doesn't make sense to bring him back, even if he can play. So it has to be Memphis. The thing that scares you about Memphis, if you're a Memphis fan, is just the lack of experience. I mean, we saw in the NFL that Joe Burrow was able to make it to the Super Bowl even on lack of experience, but experience won out in the end. Phoenix made it to the finals last year. They have the experience with Chris Paul, even though he's only made it to 1 finals. He's made it to a lot of conference finals with teams that he's been on, so he knows how hard it is, that grind.
And
the Mavs,
sorry to cut you off real quick,
experience. Luka's playing out of his mind. They're just not deep enough to really anything can happen. We've seen crazier things happen, but I would think that the Mavs would take them 6. I would say the Grizzlies would probably take them 6 as well, but Phoenix would probably still win in the end.
And what Stephen was saying earlier about, Phoenix being able to be so good in the clutch, like if you're not going to show up for all 4 quarters, you're going to have a problem. And, they'll win quarters and they'll end quarters out strong. And Monty Williams has been subbing perfectly, and they're deep as hell too. Like 1 through 12 at most, like is ready to play at a playoff level. And they understand the system offensively, defensively, and he also game plans super well too. Like that's why he's runaway candidate for Coach of the Year, and like it's just him and everybody else. So when we move on to that conversation, who do we have besides Monty Williams that could potentially threat threaten his spot for coach of the year? We'll leave that open to anybody.
I'll take it first.
Go ahead.
So I feel like there's a handful of coaches that are definitely deserving if we're looking at second place. So for that runner-up spot, you got JB Bickerstaff has been outstanding with the Cavaliers. They've had their issues with health, their bouts with guys being in and out the lineup literally all season, starting with Colin Sexton and then trickling down to most recently with Jared Allen, like the most unfortunate. And then they even sprinkle in, they get Karis LeVert, and then he misses like 2-3 weeks. Like it's just been a hodgepodge of injuries left and right for them, unfortunately. But he still has them above water, you know, in a spot where no one really predicted them to be at this season, even if it's in the playing realm, you know. So kudos to him for that. You got Taylor Jenkins, who's done an absolutely outstanding job with the Memphis Grizzlies as far as having those guys prepared and ready for every game, and for his team to be so receptive. That's an automatic sign of leadership and a coach having a pulse in his locker room, because they've been doing it, as we've all elocuted at this point. They've done so without Dillon Brooks for the majority of the season. They've done so in multiple stretches without Ja Morant. Granted, you can say that the teams that they went against weren't the best, or the teams that they went against didn't have all their pieces together either. Regardless of that, they still had a task to do, and they were up to task every single time, regardless of who's in the lineup. So Taylor Jenkins has to get a head nod as well. But I'm going to go with Eric Spoelstra, the ever steady, arguably the best coach with X's and O's, just the mastermind of basketball that he is because of what he's done with that Miami Heat team. I don't think anybody had them penciled in as a number one seed. Even as the season went on, people questioned whether they were good, whether they were sustainable, whether they could really be a threat to the Brooklyn Nets or the Golden State Warriors, the Milwaukee Bucks. All these things considered, and them at the top of the East right now, that has to get the second place nod for me.
And what I wanted to say about JB Bickerstaff is, man, he's been jumping around teams for a long time, whether it be as an assistant or an interim head coach. Like, I'm really glad that he's found a home there in Cleveland, and I think he's doing a fabulous job, and I expect to see him there for a long time. Keith, let's kick it over to you, man. Is Coach Malone doing enough to get any nod for Coach of the Year?
I don't know if he's quite there yet. I mean, I think he was well deserving of the extension that he got. Even myself, I was kind of on the fence about him for a little bit, but what he's had to deal with these past two seasons with Murray missing significant time both seasons and Porter Jr. missing time all of this season, I think he deserves his props for that. But I think there's people above him like Monty Williams, JB Bickerstaff, Taylor Jenkins, Eric Spoelstra. I think Monty Williams is going to win the award, but I wish Monty was here so I could see his face because he hates this man. But Eric Spoelstra has been phenomenal this season. On a lighthearted note, a coach is doing well because he's holding his players accountable, and he's got players wanting to fight him because he's not taking their crap. But on a serious note, who had Miami as the number one seed in the East? I mean, the East has been an absolute juggernaut all season. Usually it's the West as a superior conference, and I think that's been the case for a while. But hands down, the East this season has been the better conference. I mean,
isn't that crazy?
Huh?
I said, isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
And how the tables have turned.
Yeah. Like
when
when the season started, it was Nets, Bucks, Sixers. That's all anyone had in conversation for winning the East. And here comes Miami, who have had their fair share of injuries as well, and they're still the number one seed, and no one saw it coming. They have good players, but they don't have the same roster that Milwaukee has or the Nets have, depending on if you want to talk about Kyrie or not. It's just I don't think he gets enough credit for what he's done with that team in that conference.
Yeah. And was it really, a dishonor to him that he didn't make the top, 15 coaches of all time, Greg?
For whom?
For Eric Spoelstra, for not to make the list of
Spoelstra was in there.
Was he in there?
Spoelstra was on that 15 list. Yeah, don't you remember
that's
how
right.
many complaints we?
Oh yeah, I was saying he shouldn't be in there.
Yeah. So,
Do you think that was rightfully deserving?
for Spoelstra, I mean, you can discount him because of what the Heat haven't done in the playoffs, minus having LeBron. However, night in, night out, regular NBA seasons to get yourself into the playoffs, Eric Spoelstra has done a masterful job as the coach of the Miami Heat. That's where he got into the top 15 list. Longevity, the continuity that he's had with the organization, that's been impressive for Spoelstra. Now, I'm sorry, I think Monty Williams is being handed the Coach of the Year thing as a narrative out there. You give me the guys that are taking a team that shouldn't be there and putting them where they are. That's the Coach of the Year to me. The Phoenix Suns were already going to be a contender in the West. This was no surprise. Absolutely none. So to me, you got to give it to a coach like in Memphis. Nobody suspected them being this good, this consistent all year. JB Bickerstaff earlier in the year, before the injuries hit them, would have been a contender. But again, you got to go to the guys that are putting teams in place that you didn't see them.
Right.
Miami was supposed to be just outside of the Bucks Brooklyn conversation, right?
Mm-hmm.
But a team that's not even supposed to be in the playoffs, a guy's got him 15 games over 500, folks. He has the best record in the league against the top teams in the league. Oh my goodness, how does that happen? That's called coaching.
Yeah, your case is a little bit better than mine, but my guy Chris Finch from the Minnesota Timberwolves, he has our guys 46 and 35, which is literally twice the amount of wins that we got last year.
Yep.
And everything has gone up: offensive efficiency, defensive efficiency, and not only that, but we almost secured a playoff spot. Shout out to Denver; they held on to it.
And they're also from the same. Our two guys are from the same coaching family.
Yes. Man, coaching overseas, growing up scouting together, and now look at them now. Man, I think it's fantastic how the league. I think the league is in good hands going forward in terms of coaching.
Hey, can I add one more thing?
I'll say about that though.
Go ahead,
it's kind of the Geno argument at UConn. It's like people discredit Geno a little because the UConn teams were so good for so long. They're supposed to be there. There's a big difference between you're supposed to be there and then being there and how you work being there. And yeah, the Suns were supposed to be there, but they have been there dominantly throughout the season. And I don't think.
I mean, again, we're getting into an area of subjectivity, though, right?
Yeah,
right.
That's the whole problem with all of these things. It becomes very subjective.
And what is crazy about Geno is so transparent, man. Being able to listen to him speak firsthand and see what he had to say all at the Final Four. Coming into that weekend, he was telling everybody, we're not the best team coming in here. All the other 11 times that I went to the national championship and won, I had the best team. We had the best, players. Like, we had the most talent. We had the best staff. Like, and we had a little bit of luck. And he was just very transparent and saying how we didn't have the best team and we need Stanford to play their worst game so that we can make it to the championship. Like, it's really astonishing. Stephen, what were you going to say a little early on?
So as far as looking at the Coach of the Year, and I've heard a handful of people say that they wouldn't pick Monty Williams this season. I would like to say, for one, I know the NBA, they will never come out and admit it, but they like to make amends for wrongfully voting for guys that won awards in years past and make amends in doing so with the season after or 2 seasons after.
Yep.
The first incident coming to mind to me that hurt me the most was when CP3 lost the MVP race to Kobe in 2008 because they gave it to Steve Nash the season before. So they're like, okay, we got to give it to Kobe this season, even though the Hornets weren't even supposed to be in the playoffs in 2008. But Chris was the head of that snake.
But again, that was all media-driven narratives as well. I mean, that's
for sure. But
right?
it was all them making amends. They're like, man, we really shouldn't have gave Steve Nash that. We should have gave it to Kobe. So we're gonna give it to him this year, and now we're gonna do this guy wrong. And that was gonna be a domino effect from that. That's gonna be kind of some of what's going on with Monty Williams. But at the same time, I feel like context matters regardless of subjectivity and everything else. The Suns are 123 and 38 since the bubble.
Wow.
123 and 38 since the bubble. That is.
He should have been coach of the year last year. He should have been the coach of the year last year.
They've jumped from 51 wins last season to 64.
Yep.
51 to 64.
That's incredible.
Like, what more can not to mention, again, I already talked about the Suns only playing their big three, 38 games. There's a lot of coaching that has to go on when you have these rotations that you have to flip and switch, get the most out of each specific player, developing players, looking at how Mikal Bridges has developed, Cam Johnson has developed, DeAndre Ayton has developed, Devin Booker has developed, Cameron Payne has developed. Like, all of these things, when you're looking at coaching, I'm looking at how you're developing guys. Is the roster getting better? Are you getting the most out of these guys? Is the team improving efficiency-wise? Like, there was a high bar for them to meet from last season, winning 51 games, when people had them as a middling team coming into the season, and they ended up finishing second. They've doubled up on those meeting expectations to now exceeding those expectations. Like, there's just he's the most all-encompassing coach there is in the league at the moment, from having a post in the locker room to being generally liked by the media. Like, all of these boxes that Monty Williams has checked off, he has them more checked off than any other coach in the league. And that's not even to degrade or diminish what all the other coaches I mentioned have done.
He's also got not just with what he's done in Phoenix. He also got shafted in New Orleans earlier.
He did.
He got shafted.
Yep. And to add on to that, gentlemen, so now we have Chris Paul that has had 4 different teams set a franchise record for regular season wins. And we have those naysayers out there that say CP3 is not a winner. Before we head to the break, I want each of you to tell me, can we put that narrative to rest?
I never believed in that narrative. I don't know where it even started from.
Right.
Like
ESPN, Keith. ESPN.
His teams may have never won a championship, but he's always been a vital reason of why his teams got as far as they did. I will say that he does have that bad luck that he gets injured always in the playoffs.
That damn hamstring, man.
And that I think that's what hurts him the most. But as far as actual production on the court, I mean, you can say stats can be manipulated, but in his case, the numbers don't lie.
Yep.
What? Exactly. I mean, the guy's done it for how many seasons now?
17.
17 for him, yeah. It's just crazy the way that they took and ran with this, that he's not a winner. BS.
Yeah.
You get your teams there, and it's a total crapshoot once you're in the playoffs. We all know this.
Mm-hmm.
It is so hard to become that one team out of the 16, right? It's not easy. Chris Paul is a winner on the court. He's proven it year after year after year. Plain and simple.
One of the most cerebral basketball minds to ever play the game.
Yeah.
All right, thank you so much for joining us on the Nuts and Bolts Association podcast. We're going to take a couple commercial breaks, and we will catch y'all in just a little bit.
Enjoy 40% off site-wide. Vitable takes the guesswork out of feeling good. Get your own personalized daily vitamin pack safely delivered to your doorstep every month. Take their online quiz to find out which vitamins and minerals can support your personal needs based on your own diet and lifestyle. Hashtag only what you need, nothing that you don't. All vitamins are manufactured in Australia at the highest quality standard. Ingredients come in the best form for their absorption by your body. Enjoy 40% off site-wide using code NBS40 at checkout.
Welcome back to the Nuts and Bolts Association podcast. To the second half of the show, we got to talk about the Eastern Conference. We got to talk about Man, what else we got to talk about? We got to talk about players scoring 50-point games, and we got to talk about who's a contender, who's a sleeper team, and who's a team that's going into the playoffs that's going to be an easy out. Let's knock that one out first. So when we're looking at the playoff picture, guys, we got some great teams, we got some okay teams, and we got some obvious goofy teams at the bottom. Can y'all hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Just double checking. So when we look at the playoff picture, is there any of these teams that you feel might be an easy out if some of these play-in teams make it into the playoffs, or some of these lower seeds that will be going up against tough matchups?
I'll take this one first because I have been waiting to get on this team, especially with how they started the season. I think the easiest out in the East is the Chicago Bulls. And I don't think you can dispute it when you look at their record against the top teams in the East, their record against the top teams in the West. It's not good. Like, they play lesser teams or even teams really well, but when it comes to teams who really have a potential to be NBA champions, they're just not it. Yeah, they have had injuries, but everyone's had injuries. They've had DeMar DeRozan for most of the season. Caruso's been in and out. Ball's been out, but I mean, how many excuses are we going to give them? And then when it comes down to their best player's historical performance in the playoffs, and that's DeMar DeRozan, I could easily see them losing to one of those play-in teams if they make it in the playoffs. I just don't see it.
And Steven, do you have anything to back that up or go against?
Yeah, the hometown team is definitely the weakest link at the moment in terms of looking at teams who are the easiest out in the playoffs. I kind of talked about it earlier this week on Twitter. The Bulls are – so there's just a certain standard that your team is going to have regardless of who's in the lineup, regardless of who's out the lineup, and regardless of who the opponent is and what the location of the game is. Like me and Greg and even Keith have talked about teams that have had their starters and varying players in and out of the lineup for portions of the season. Of course, you're going to see a drop-off in production, but there's a standard, like a level of focus and energy and preparation is going to come regardless of who's in and who's out of the lineup, and regardless of whether that player is your best defender or your best offensive player or even your captain or your top leader. There's going to be a certain standard. And the Bulls, in my opinion, from the outside looking in, seeing so many games this season, it seems like there's a level of leadership that needs to be in question at this point, because it's for a sustained period of time now that they've struggled with just having like a contender's level of play, regardless of who's in and out the lineup. Like, that's something that shouldn't vary. Like, of course, the production is going to vary, but there's a standard that should be in place, and they just don't have that like backbone at the moment. Because soon as Caruso leaves, the defense falls off, and it's just,
like with what Keith said, man, they haven't been consistent, and in order to have leadership, there's got to be consistency.
Yep.
And the same, like when I tell my teams this all the time that I coach, like the vocabulary we use has to be the same from top to bottom. If you don't know what we're talking about, you're gonna have a problem, and you're not gonna be on the court, because there has to be a level of communication out there, on the floor, off the floor, and in that consistency, it's much easier to hold each other accountable. And I just feel that to be the easiest way to do it. Consistency is key. Greg, do you have any other team that might be an easy out in the play-in playoffs, or is it just Chicago?
Well, Chicago, and then unfortunately for them, it'll be Cleveland because of the injury situation. They're too young, and they don't have enough depth anymore because of the injuries, right? So I don't see them lasting very long. Chicago is so much easier to pick because, as I mentioned about a certain other team who had the best record against the top three in each conference, Chicago has the absolute worst. They were 0-15 at one point against those same six teams. 0-15. They don't play well against anybody who has, the top records in the league. They just don't.
Right.
So that's why they're so easy.
How do we feel about Utah over in the West? Are they going to be able to make it out the first round against the Dallas Mavericks?
No.
No.
And so
they are
Rudy
their worst
Gobert came out
opponent.
with a quote recently saying how people are trying to consistently tear them up, them being Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell. That's the running narrative, is that they have not been able to play together well, or it's just not the right fit. Is it something that's around them that needs to be fixed, or does that duo need to be split up?
No, it's everything around them that needs to be fixed. You've got Donovan Mitchell as your threat, and outside of that, there is absolutely nobody that scares you on the Utah Jazz on a consistent basis. So, and it's the other pieces around them. You got to have something around these guys in order to make a roster that actually can contend. You can't just do it with one scorer, one threat in this league. You just can't.
And we all know the on-off numbers. Sorry, we all know. I'll let you go real quick.
I think it's due to that fact that they're going to be split, because they're not going to get rid of Mitchell, but Gobert is very good defensively, and that's it. He is horribly one-dimensional. And there are teams who are going to want that one-dimensional style of play, but it's not working for the Jazz, especially when you look at how they were successful when they were really good. They were knocking down threes all over the court, and Gobert detracts from that. So they're going to look to bring in
Rudy Gobert. Welcome to Tom Thibodeau and the New York Knicks.
He's going to sign on for a bag too. We have any other teams that might be an easy out in this playoff picture?
Nah, I feel like everybody else is. I mean, you can always say one of the play-in teams because they're going against a team that's so far, as far as record, better than them. So that's like an easy cop-out answer. But I think we nailed it as far as the two teams from the East being the Bulls and the Cavs, unfortunately, and then the West being the Jazz.
Yeah, I don't see any other picks besides the Atlanta Hawks. We're going
to get to that. We're going to get to that.
We'll get to that probably next week. So let's go with the sleeper team, gentlemen. Who is your sleeper team in either conference? Leave that open.
All right, I'll start this one.
Yeah,
I got for the East, the Toronto Raptors.
Very nice.
That team has championship DNA in multiple spots that are of relevance within their roster, starting with the coach, Nick Nurse. He's one of the best tacticians from the sideline. He has the pulse of his team. He knows how to deploy the team that he has this season and coach them to what their strengths are, not what the strengths of teams from the past are. He's coaching them to their strengths. They have big shot makers and Fred VanVleet and Gary Trent Jr. Pascal Siakam is one of the highest motor and energy guys in the league that has it for 48 minutes a game. They have trees and length across the board outside of their two starting guards. Like, they have the continuity, and they all have bought into the system that they're running, especially defensively, being able to play so many different styles of play to take teams out of their comfort zones and bring those games to make up for their lack of offense, bring those games closer to the pace that they need to give themselves a puncher's chance in the end. And they just have everything that you need in a playoff setting, especially to be of relevance and push a team that you probably don't have any business beating, pushing them to at least the brink of elimination, if not giving yourself a chance to actually overcome them and finish the upset.
And
my team in the East is Toronto.
You said it best, man. They have championship DNA, and as Greg knows, as we all know, that's not anything new. Nick Nurse has been there consistently. He's had that same core group of young guys, and they've been adding length. Greg, please enlighten us further on why the Raptors are the sleeper team in the East.
Well, Stephen talked about the number 38 with the Suns there. Try only 23 games together. 23. So either OG, Fred, Siakam, whomever has been out. Trent has been out a few games. Scotty missed some games too. They've only put together their quote-unquote roster 23 times this year. They're 15 games above 500. The scary thing is is that they no longer have to worry about teams below them that they tend to play down to. This group, when you get them together and they're facing a Phoenix, they're facing a Philadelphia or a Miami, go against Miami. 2-1 against Miami. 3-0 versus Milwaukee. 2-2 with Boston. 3-1 against the Sixers. If you want to talk about a bunch of guys that, oh, you're better than us, give me a break. We're going to play our game, and you got to handle what we do to you. Joel Embiid got his easy 30 points the other night. I mean, they gave him the points. Joel Embiid couldn't stop Pascal. Joel Embiid couldn't stop Gary Trent. And there's no Van Vliet and Anunoby, two of the best defensive players in the league, and they handled Atlanta. They handled Philadelphia. When you have this type of a defense, and it's from 1 through 9, some nights 10, when they throw out a lineup that doesn't have Van Vliet and Trent in it, like even when they've started, they'll throw out Barnes, Boucher, Achua, Siakam, and Kem Birch. You cannot go anywhere. You don't go anywhere. Their length just absolutely overwhelms you. They turn the ball over. Because they get so many turnovers, they don't have to worry about your set defense because they're getting their butts down that floor and scoring easy buckets.
And I'm glad you brought that up so we can move into our last conversation of the day. We've had around 19 players that have scored 50 points or more this season. I didn't put this question in the email, but I'm thinking you guys are ready for this one. And so all these players, are they really this good at scoring, or has scoring become easier as time gone on? Keith, I'll kick it to you first, man.
Whether they're good or not, I honestly don't think really matters. I think what it really matters is the NBA finally has what they want. As much as people like to complain about how soft the NBA is or how much easier it is to score, when there's a low-scoring game, all people do is complain about how low-scoring the game is. So,
not me.
like people like you and I know, like I probably crazy like good defense. I don't necessarily equate good defense to the WWE moves they used to pull back in the 90s. Like, I think those are two completely different stories. But as much as people complain as a whole in general about the league being soft, they don't like low-scoring games either. So when you have these players scoring 50 points a game, games that are 140 to 122, at the end of the day, those are the most watched games, and that's what's putting people in the seats and money in the pockets of the NBA. So the league has got what they wanted, and whether people want to admit it or not, they're getting what they want as well.
I'd have to agree. But it's just staggering. Like, I felt like there was there's like 3 weeks in March where 50 here, 50 there, LeBron, Luka, Trey, Tatum, Cat, 32 and a quarter. Like, it just seems all too, coincidental.
Yeah, but also let's look at who these guys were putting their 50s up against.
Exactly.
Right?
Spurs,
it's not like a 1 seed versus a 1 seed and you saw a 50-point game. Right?
Yeah.
So, and you're in the
Katie and Giannis in the
you're in the dog days. When these games were happening, most of them, you're in the dog days of the season. Teams have now been eliminated from contention, etc. All those factors going into it, the injuries and all that sort of stuff. Give me 50-point games in the playoffs that matter.
Right. Steven, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I mean, the one game that I'm thinking of, and Keith's not going to want to hear this one, but it should have been another 50-point game if he made his free throws at the end. But Devin Booker in Denver a few weeks ago at 49, and I feel like that was the only one that was relevant enough because it was against a viable team on the second night of a back-to-back, and it was on the road as well. I feel like that's the one that it wasn't 50, so we can't necessarily equate it to the others. Mm-hmm. But I feel like that was the most, in my opinion, the most impressive one because of the context involved with it.
Hey, it's free throw awareness month. He's got to know better.
Oh, man.
And I'm glad you said someone that got close to 50 because just the other night, on Thursday evening, Anthony Edwards and the Minnesota Timberwolves were trying to get Ant his 50 as he had 48. He started chucking up threes, and the Spurs actually cut the score down to just a 4-point lead. So how do we feel about players searching for 50s, searching for those career highs? Greg, let me know,
I
man.
mean, that was sad to watch. Anthony Edwards, you know how to get into the paint? Use the damn backboard. There's your easy 2 points, but no, you got to jack up threes. I mean, that's the problem when you see stuff like that happening. It's like on the fast break, and you don't see guys attacking the bucket. You see them fanning out to the corner. It's like, oh my God, what are you doing? That's not basketball.
And when I was watching that, it kind of reminded me of this moment here a couple of years ago when Kyrie was in Boston and Jamal Murray tries to get his 50 while he had 47 at the end of the game there. And Kyrie throws the balls in the stands. He said he was searching for that. He doesn't deserve that damn ball.
Yeah.
If I was that fan that caught that ball, man, I am out. I'm saying, hey, come cover me. I am getting out of this building.
Oh, that's his ball. It's his ball.
I'd probably deflate the ball and then put it in my jacket and run out of there.
It's a two-way thing. I mean, it's the monetization of the NBA. Like, there is money to be made by scoring these 50-point games. And then you do the three-point shot, and it's relevant. A lot of people who are getting these 50, 60-point games are 7, 8, 9 threes in those games. But really what it really boils down to is, even if defense is harder to play in the NBA, I'm still not letting someone score 60 on me. It's not happening. I don't care if I have to foul out. You can score 60 on someone else. You're not going to score on me.
Sorry, I was trying to put up the highlight there for you while you were speaking, but it didn't really work out for me. Like, I did not like how Ant was trying to search for that 50. I would have put the bench guys in there and let them finish out the game. You know, Jordan McLaughlin, Jaden McDaniels, Vando, Jalen Noel. I'd rather have those guys in there instead of seeing Ant try to just jack up threes. It's just ugly and strict. You know, if you ask me, I don't think it's very professional. People get mad at Steve Kerr for sitting his guys when they have 60 points through three quarters, but when you see something like this, you realize why it's a bad look, and we're going to hold Stephen Clay to that high standard of excellence and class, and I think that's where the difference lies. Gentlemen, I think that's a good way to wrap it up. We had a fantastic show today. We had some good picks, some great playoff talk, and we will be back next Wednesday with a playoff edition, or a pre-playoff edition, and some play-in games, and looking forward to that. Gentlemen, please let the people know what you got coming up for yourselves in the upcoming weeks. Greg, what do you got coming up?
Well, I've been focusing a little bit more on the NFL draft these days. We'll be doing the draft show all 3 days with Jeff and Bill. That's coming up at the end of the month, of course. Cowboys, Raptors, Blue Jays, all sorts of different articles at nutsandboltsports.com, and the occasional Greg Gripes podcast. I didn't gripe too much in the last one. I'm kind of saving it up.
Yeah, you got to build that anger up a little bit.
Yeah, I got to build it up, right?
You got to get Monty on for one of those.
Yeah.
And then you guys, oh no, instant high blood pressure. Here we go.
Keith, my man, thank you so much for joining us today. What do you got coming up in your world?
Not so much. I mean, NBA season's rolling down, but really been focusing on Colorado Rapids. Be going to their next game. Well, not their next game. Be going
soccer
to their game
team, right?
23rd. What?
The soccer team?
Yeah, Colorado Rapids, the MLS team. Mm-hmm. Went to one of their games a month back. Going on the 23rd. Going to be going a few after that. So we're trying to expand, get into some soccer more. Everyone knows about our NFL and NBA. So let's talk about the original football.
Steven, last but not least, man, what do you got coming up in your world?
Plenty of content coming out per usual. A lot of Suns talk with the playoffs coming up, the high expectations. A lot of Bulls talk with them making their first playoff appearance in about 4 seasons. Just a lot of NBA talk in general. Third-year guards are having amazing seasons. this year. They're taking over the most improved and sixth man of the year award races. What else we got? The WNBA is coming up very soon. I got plenty of WNBA talk and content coming up, and then a lot of stuff on Twitter as well.
I'm down to run a WNBA podcast this season.
Let's do it. Hey, let's do it, man.
Are you also Phoenix for the WNBA season?
Nah, it's really all encompassing more than anything with the W, but it's more so Sky because they're so local.
They're local to you. Okay, I was going to say if you were Phoenix too in the WNBA, it's Kia Nurse, Canadian.
Yeah. Shout out Kia. Hopefully she comes back from that.
She is coming back strong. She is rehabbed. She's been doing the broadcasts for both the Final Four and the Raptors.
Mm-hmm. I heard her. Yeah.
And she's going to be ready to roll. She actually that was her last game last night. She's back in Phoenix and she'll be ready to go.
Big season coming up for them.
Yeah, I think women's basketball is in a better place than it's ever been.
Yes,
huge.
Being, 18,000 in the Target Center, that's doing better than the Timberwolves on a regular basis. Man, they wouldn't even scratch 11,000 at times. And now look at this. We're selling out the Target Center for women's basketball, packing the place out. People are there in the streets celebrating. It's a great time. Not enough support for Paige Beckers that weekend, but, it's all good.
Hey, shout out the coolest coach in the world, Don Staley, and shout out to Boston as well, cashing in and bringing that championship home. Another one for Don Staley. She's unbelievable.
Diana Taurasi and Sue Bird and that telecast.
Yes.
The woman's
shout out to our wild woman DT. She is out of control.
Hey, in a game of inches, just call on the Cox, man.
And it's coming. One of these women is going to get that. One of these women is going to get that gig in the NBA.
Oh, for sure.
Yep.
No
it's coming.
Man, shout out to the W. I cannot wait for that to get started. We're going to be doing some preview shows, get some articles out, all that good stuff. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me on the Nuts and Bolts Association podcast, and we'll be seeing you next Wednesday, playoff edition. See you then.